When Milos Forman's Hair premiered in 1979, it arrived as something quite different from its 1968 Broadway predecessor, Hair, the American tribal love rock musical. While both celebrate the turbulent spirit of Vietnam-era youth counterculture, the film adaptation reimagined key characters, reshaped plot arcs, and injected cinematic storytelling into what was originally a riotous, anti-war stage celebration. Now, in the original stage production, Claude is already a tribal member, a bohemian who lives in a communal New York City apartment with his tribe, resists draft pressures, and fully embodies hippie ideals. He debates whether to burn his draft card with other tribe members, ultimately succumbing to conscription and dying in Vietnam in the play's tragic finale. Let the Sun Shine In is first sung somberly to close the show and later reprised as a more upbeat curtain call anthem, reinforcing the bittersweet contrast. The film takes a radically different approach, however. Instead of a hippie insider, Claude Hooper Bukowski, played here by John Savage, is rewritten as a naive farm boy from Oklahoma, fleshly drafted and on his way to join the army. In New York, he encounters a free-spirited group of hippies led by George Berger, played by Treat Williams, who introduce him to drugs, love, and freewheeling rebellion, a stark shift from the original communal roots. This narrative pivot fundamentally reshapes Hair's emotional core. Claude's personal journey becomes about discovery rather than an established identity within the counterculture. Critics and original creators, Jerome Ragni and James Rando, felt this change diluted the musical's essence, seeing the film's tribe more as quirky characters than connected activists in a real peace movement. Another major shift comes towards the end of the film. In the play, Claude himself goes to Vietnam and dies. But in the film version, Berger, concerned for his friend's fate, cuts his own hair, dons Claude's uniform, and switches places with him at the army base, so Claude can have a final day with the tribe. Berger then mistakenly is removed with the troops bound for Vietnam and dies in combat. Berger's death is memorialized in a poignant headstone showing his name and the date of birth and death: George Berger, Vietnam, October 11, 1945 to April 6, 1968, anchoring the tragedy in a deeply personal way rather than an anonymous loss. The film's emotional climax occurs at what appears to be the Arlington National Cemetery in Arlington, Virginia, where Claude, Sheila, Jeannie, and other tribe members stand at Berger's grave. This setting underscores the cost of war and the transition from carefree youth to sobering reality, and is a memorable and deliberate backdrop for the final performance of Let the Sun Shine In. Although some sources debate the exact filming logistics, whether the cemetery sequences were shot on a military installation or a stand-in location used for principal photography, the impression of Arlington anchors the film's anti-war message. Behind the scenes, Hair blended real cinematic spectacle with grassroots energy. Central Park set pieces, several elaborate musical sequences including Colored Spade, Ain't Got No, and Aquarius, huge casts of local New York residents, with some estimates suggesting upwards of 10,000 extras in these vibrant scenes. Even larger outdoor numbers, like 3500 and Let the Sun Shine In, reportedly involved 20,000 backdrop performers staged around the iconic spots, such as the Lincoln Memorial on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. Shura Barnes, who sings the unforgettable movie rendition of Easy to Be Hard, once worked as a maid in Maine before landing the role after an open audition, impressing director Forman with, as he put it, her voice was like a bell. Forman later noted that one of his few casting regrets was selecting Nicholas Ray as the general, in part due to Ray's health, struggling during the shoot. Several songs from the original Broadway score were omitted or rearranged for the pacing, a reflection of how the film prioritized narrative over theatrical spectacle. Upon release, Hair received generally favorable reviews for box office success, though its reinterpretation sparked debates among fans of the musical. While the Broadway version remains a historically significant protest piece of the 1960s counterculture, the film stands as a distinct adaptation, a cinematic coming-of-age story with musical flourishes that also captures the nostalgic look back at the era that already passed by the late 1970s. Now, having seen the stage version of Hair twice over the years, I somehow never got around to watching Milos Forman's 1979 film adaptation. And honestly, I'm glad I finally did. While certain aspects, in fact the majority of the aspects, are changed quite drastically, for me you almost have to view the film on its own. Yes, it may be inspired by the musical, but it really is a complete and utter reinterpretation of that story. Look, some aspects are undeniably dated, but it still remains beautiful, emotionally resonant and culturally important piece of cinema that captures the spirit of a pivotal moment in modern history. At its core, Hair is a vivid snapshot of the anti-war movement of the 1960s, specifically the growing resistance to the Vietnam War and the rise of hippie counterculture. Few films managed to encapsulate the era's political unrest, musical experimentation, and youthful idealism as effectively as this one does. It's not just a musical, it's a time capsule. What struck me immediately is how different the film is from the original stage play, though largely in a positive way. While it retains many of the show's most iconic songs, several numbers are rearranged or omitted, and some of the more abstract theatrical moments don't translate directly to film, but Forman compensates by reshaping the narrative into something more cinematic and emotionally grounded. The changes won't please purists, but they give the movie its own identity rather than functioning as a filmed, staged performance. The cast is one of the greatest strengths. Treat Williams in particular delivers an outstanding and deeply charismatic performance here as Berger. It's a role bursting with energy, humor, and tragic weight, and arguably the defining performance of his career. Williams was an actor who never quite reached the heights his talent suggested he should. But here he is magnetic, creative, rebellious, and heartbreakingly sincere. It's a phenomenal performance, and one that deserves far more recognition. Beverly D'Angelo is also excellent, bringing warmth and emotional complexity to her role. But John Savage, though, however, feels somewhat miscast here as Claude. His performance comes across as a little flat, lacking the emotional range needed for such a pivotal character. While he's serviceable, he's easily overshadowed by the rest of the ensemble, who are uniformly strong. Musically, Hair is an absolute triumph. From Aquarius to the electrifying title song to Let the Sunshine In, the soundtrack is bursting with energy, rebellion, and soul. The lyrics are often provocative, deliberately pushing boundaries, something that was radical at the time and still feels refreshingly bold today. The music isn't just catchy, it's ideological, emotional, and deeply tied to the story's anti-war message. What makes Hair particularly striking is how relevant it still feels. In today's political climate, its themes of questioning authority, resisting unnecessary wars, and valuing humanity over violence remain powerful and resonant. The film asks us to think before we pick up guns, a message that sadly never seems to lose relevance. From a filmmaking standpoint, Forman's direction is confident and inspired. He balances spectacle with intimacy, allowing large musical numbers to coexist with quiet, reflective moments. The result is a film that feels both epic and personal. Ultimately, Hair is a film that perhaps hasn't received long-term recognition it deserves. It's been somewhat lost in time, overshadowed by other musicals and counterculture films, but revisiting it now reveals just how much it has to offer, artistically, politically, and emotionally. And for me, though, this is a film that stands on its own, loosely inspired by the musical, rather than being a film adaptation of the said musical. Beautifully made, powerfully performed, and thematically rich, Hair remains an essential film experience. Hair gets a 9 out of 10. So what did you think of Hair? Please let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.